Hello everyone. Whoop. Voiced a little thingy there. Welcome to the stream. I need to fix my eyebrows. That's the weirdest thing I've ever said on one of these. Let me just adjust something so that I don't look like a complete weirdo. Okay, there we go. Jeez. These things are a lot of work. Yeah, welcome to the stream. Especially if you're new here. This character is one I finished today, really, yesterday-ish. And this is he's gonna help me tell this story, I guess, is what's going on there. I thought it would be cool. He's called the Reader of the Golden Witch, Reader for short. If you've been, checking in occasionally, you might have seen me working on him, and he's now done. Hi Jeff, welcome to the stream. It's pretty much that, yeah. I just thought it would be cool to have like a little character, but let's not waste too much time because wow, do we have reading to do. Let me just oh no, hold on. I have forgotten a thing. My chat box is in the wrong place. My production value. Okay, this is potentially going to go off screen. Oh, I will tolerate that for now. No, I will not. I fixed it. Okay. Also, thank you. Let me throw us over to where our game is going to happen. I should have loaded my save. Let's do that right away. And I'm gonna also turn on the sound. Whoop. That was a little loud on my end. Should be fine on yours. For those of you who are new and haven't watched any of these before, we are following a very rich family. They part of the family lives on an island. Once a year they have a conference there with the whole family, and as you can probably already hear, there's a typhoon going on, which means that everyone is trapped on this island. Now there's some financial problems that the family is having, which has been causing a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements, and some mild threats. There are also rumors of 10 tons of gold, which is an incredible amount of gold. And this is said to be hidden on the island. So everyone wants the gold, pretty much, is the gist of it. On top of that, over the course of this weekend where the family is together, during the first night, 6 members of the family just are murdered. Brutally murdered and left in a shed. And that's before I even tell you that there's rumors and legends about a witch who supposedly made the family rich in the first place. And now that people are dying, there's some people who are saying, oh, it's the witch that did it, as she's collecting the debt that the head of the family, this man, Kinzo, that he owes everyone. Owes the witch, sorry. So basically they're collecting the witch is collecting everyone's lives as collateral for the loan that he got from this witch, which would be, the loan itself is the 10 tons of gold. And that's kind of where we're coming in. At this point, two members of the family have left the group to take a break after things got heated and there was a lot of arguing, and yeah, from there, it's been a couple hours, and that's where we're gonna start. So I'm just gonna start reading it. The distance from the kitchen to the parlor wasn't that great, so Genji had gone and come back by himself. But the guest room was a little further away. Natsuhi had warned him to avoid being alone whenever possible. And just now, Nancho had also admonished him, saying it would be better if he held a little more concern for his safety. Kanon accompanied Genji, and the two of them went to visit Eva and Hideyoshi in their guest room. I also forgot really important. We got a bit of a content warning on this game, so if there's any of these subjects, you know, if you don't want to deal with those, if you want to avoid them, look after yourself, go and do something relaxing. And I'll see you next time, probably, when I'm not playing a horror mystery game. And with that, back to reading. Genji knocked on the door. Eva-sama, Hideyoshi-sama, dinner has been prepared. He waited a short while for them to come out, but there was no response. Genji-sama, look at this. Kanon pointed under the door. A Western envelope had been inserted under it. Normally, when something was inserted this way, it'd be interpreted as a message from someone outside to someone in the room. So, since this might be a private note meant for Eva and Hideyoshi, it was not something that Kanon and Genji were supposed to take interest in. But this Western envelope was one of Kinzo's, the same kind as the one Maria had taken out last night and surprised everyone with. There can be no mistake. It is one of the Master's envelopes. Or could it be... Even though this was one of Kinzo's envelopes, the letter Maria had read aloud the previous night hadn't come from Kinzo. Genji continued knocking a little harder and called out in a loud voice. Eva-sama, Eva-sama, it is Genji. Are you there? Please answer, Eva-sama. But there was no response from inside. Sometimes, when the servants went to call some guests for a meal, the guests would be sleeping so deeply that they wouldn't wake up. In times like that, the servants would stick a letter in the door to show that it was time to come out and leave the guest be. But despite that, Genji beat even harder on the door and called out Eva's name. However, there was no answer. Kanon stuck his ear up to the door, held his breath, and listened for any sounds coming from inside. I hear something that sounds like the television, but I don't sense anyone. The room might be empty. Genji took out a handkerchief and, careful not to touch it with his bare hands, gently pulled out the envelope that had been stuck under the door. It was sealed with deep red sealing wax. Without a doubt, the mark on that sealing wax had come from the Ushiromiya family head's ring. Eva-sama, Eva-sama, please, answer. Are you still in your room? But there was still no answer. There was a chance that those two were aimlessly walking around the mansion. This was the home Eva had grown up in. There was plenty of reason to think that she had gone out on a casual stroll. Genji groped around in his pocket and pulled out the bundle of keys, which contained the key that would open the guest room. Genji-sama. Kanon also understood what this meant. They would sometimes unlock the door so they could go in and do things like make the beds, but only after they made sure the guests were out. To unlock the door for any other reason, and especially to do so when there was still a chance the guests hadn't given permission and might still be in there, was an action unbecoming of a servant. But Genji had decided. If the only problem had been that his knock hadn't received a reply, he wouldn't have gone this far. But the envelope under the door was doubtlessly one of Kinzo's. Or rather, one of the western envelopes of the Ushiromiya family head. After last night, the sender of this envelope could be someone other than Kinzo. If this letter had been sent by someone else... Eva-sama, my apologies. Allow me to enter your room. After giving that final notice, Genji stuck one of the keys from the bundle into the keyhole. There was the sound of the door unlocking, and, after slowly turning the knob, he slowly started opening the door. Light seeped through the crack of the door. Were they in the room? Or had they forgotten to turn out the lights? Clink. It was the sound of the door chain being pulled tight. The chain had been secured. The chain couldn't be secured from the outside, so it also proved that they were in the room. The sound of voices on the TV seeped out of the room. The lights, the chain, and the TV, all of these things made it clear that they were in the room. But there was no sign of them. Genji called to Eva once again through the crack of the door, but there was no answer. Genji-sama, what should we do? As part of their job, the servants were able to unlock almost any door, any lock in the mansion. But they had no way to open the door with the chain. The only way to get by the chain was to cut it. That was certainly not permitted as part of a servant's usual work. A creepy chill had already rushed up their backs. Kanon held his breath again and tried to send someone through the door, but even so, he was not able to sense anyone. I will call Madam and return. Kanon, cut the chain. Yes. As Kanon hurried away to get a cutting tool, Genji called him to a stop. Wait, Kanon. Return to the kitchen and take Kumasawa with you. You must not act alone. Yes, certainly. It looked like Kanon was wondering why he had to do something so troublesome in the middle of this urgent situation. But Genji had said it out of weariness. He didn't care what happened to himself, but in the worst case scenario, he didn't want anything to happen to Kanon. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was piling food on the servant cart, and Nanjo was waiting for Genji, apparently wanting to show him a move he finally thought up that might turn the tables on him. But Genji's appearance immediately told him that something was wrong. Whoa, what has happened, Genji-san? Dr. Nanjo, my apologies, but please allow this match to be suspended for the time being. Kanon, take care of the chain. Kumasawa, stop setting up dinner for now and accompany Kanon. I will go over to Madam. If you would come with me, Dr. Nanjo. Has something happened? Genji took Nanjo, who still didn't know what was going on, and quickly left the kitchen. Kumasawa-san, my apologies, but please come with me. What just happened, Kanon-san? Kumasawa said almost exactly the same thing as Nanjo, unable to take in the situation, and chased after Kanon, who had flown out into the hallway. Taking Kumasawa with him, Kanon went to a storage room and looked through the tools packed in toolboxes and hanging all over the walls, trying to find something that could be used to cut the chain. What are you looking for? Let me help too. We're cutting a door chain. Where was that large wire cutter? A door chain? Why would you do something like that? the chain to Eva-sama and Hideyoshi-sama's room. Even though they should be inside, they didn't answer when we called them. It took Kumasawa some time to figure out how cutting the chain and Eva and Hideyoshi not answering were connected, but she did realize that this was an urgent situation. That one will probably do the trick. Kanon took down a very large wire cutter that had been hanging on the wall. It was called a cutter, but maybe it'd be easier to understand if we said it was shaped like a large pair of pliers. Kanon remembered once being warned that this dangerous tool could easily cut through one of your fingers. Kanon took that and rushed up the stairs. He already knew, instinctively. He should fight for every minute, every second to open it quickly. Or perhaps it was already. Please wait, Kanon-san. Hurry. Kumasawa eventually caught up with him, gasping for breath with both hands on her knees. When Kanon changed his grip on the wire cutters and looked up at the door, he let out an "ah," struck speechless. What is this? Kumasawa screamed weakly, her face pallid. That was no surprise, because right there, on the door, just like the magic circle that had been drawn on the shutter of the Rose Garden storehouse, there was another eerie shape, drawn with a blood-like paint. However, it would be odd to call this one a magic circle, because unlike what most people would expect, it wasn't a circle with shapes drawn inside it, but a slightly more complicated geometrical shape. However, those strange characters filling in the gaps, which weren't from the alphabet, were the same kind as the ones on that magic circle on the shutter. But the thing that had Kanon struck speechless wasn't how eerie the magic circle was. It was that something like this hadn't been there a short while ago. First, he had taken a trip back to the kitchen. After that, he'd gone to the storage room to grab a tool and headed right back. Put those together and it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. How could someone add something this creepy during that period of time? And as though it had just been drawn, almost like the door itself was bleeding. Several unsettling vertical red lines slowly dripped down, getting longer and longer. Kumasawa's knees gave way, and she sank down on the spot. If Kumasawa hadn't done this first, then Kanon surely would have wanted to. Beatrice-sama. It's the work of Beatrice-sama. How horrid. Kanon gulped, then readied the wire cutter and approached the door. He didn't want to get close to this disturbing magic circle, and he really didn't want to touch the steadily dripping substance that looked like blood. But if he didn't get close, he wouldn't be able to cut the chain. Fighting this cold feeling, he gulped again, and after gathering his courage, he went even closer, putting the wire cutter up against the chain. He then pressed with all of his strength, managing to cut through the chain far more easily than it had anticipated. The cut chain fell into 2 separate parts, which continued to clang as they swayed back and forth. Kanon-san, there's an envelope by your feet, and isn't that the master's? It looked like Kumasawa had also noticed the western envelope at the bottom of the door, and that the sealing wax had been sealed with the head's ring. Kanon hesitated for just a second over whether he should open the letter first or check inside the room, but he eventually decided on fulfilling his original purpose. Kanon pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. This was so he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the door. If his worst fears were realized, the police would want to investigate this room too. He slowly pushed the door open. He was able to more clearly hear the sound of the television, which had been seeping out faintly this whole time. Eva-sama? Eva was lying face up on the bed. On the bed with her shoes still on? Kumasawa, who had fearfully entered after Kanon, and who was hiding behind his back, screamed a short eek again when she saw Eva like that. Eva's shoes had been the first part of her that Kanon had seen, so the oddness of wearing shoes in bed was the first thing to strike him. But when Eva's head shifted into his line of sight, Kanon couldn't help but let out a short scream like Kumasawa. Right in the middle of Eva's forehead, something had been placed? Something was growing there? No. Right in the center of her forehead. Was it an old-fashioned knife? That, or some weapon like it, was sticking out. At the base of where it was stuck in, blood dripped down, staining the sheet on the other side, bright red. Kumasawa's knees gave way once more, and she sank down on the floor. Her mouth kept flapping open and closed, but she couldn't even scream. Hey, Anne, you, dropped in at a really scary moment. Sorry. I'm gonna keep reading. Eva was dead, with some kind of weapon sticking out of her forehead. Both eyes were open wide, and the image of the person who killed her must have been burned into them. But the only mouth capable of naming that person had been shut for all eternity. Even though her forehead was the last place they wanted to look, they couldn't tear their eyes from it. Right there, the weapon was stuck into Ava's forehead, standing almost perfectly upright. And on the handle was a complicated design that you wouldn't expect to see on an ordinary weapon. That thing could be summed up with the word occult. It was a vulgar object with a design that might have been some demon. What about Hideyoshi-sama? Hideyoshi-sama? Eva was on top of the bed, but the other bed was empty. Where was Hideyoshi? After taking a backwards glance at Kumasawa, still on her knees and stupefied, he checked the bathroom just in case. At the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by steam and the sound of the shower. The bathroom was of the same familiar style as most hotel bathrooms. When taking a shower, a waterproof curtain was used to keep water from flying out. That waterproof curtain was half open. And lying tumbled down in the bathtub was Hideyoshi, completely naked with both eyes open. Creepy. And pointing right at Kanon. Just like Eva, a weapon with a demon-like design was stuck into his forehead. Since his head had been under the shower's hot water this whole time, his face wasn't half covered and filthy with blood like Ava's had been. But the sight of him dead, while still taking a shower, was tragic enough. Just then, they heard Natsuki's voice coming from the hall. She was probably coming with Genji. Again with this graffiti. What about this letter? What does it say inside? I don't know. I haven't read it yet. We shouldn't touch it carelessly. The culprit's fingerprints might be left on it. We should hand it over to the police. They went out of their way to leave it here. I'm sure they wouldn't have left fingerprints. As Natsuki said that, she picked up the envelope. And, before checking its contents, she entered the room herself, where she found Ava, dead. Ava-san! Madam, Hideyoshi-san is here too. This is truly atrocious. Kanon, turn off the shower. Don't let this be any more pitiful than it needs to be. Yes, ma'am. Kanon gripped his handkerchief and twisted the valve, turning off the shower. In the bathtub, a small jar of body soap had fallen with its cap off. It really looked like he'd been attacked while taking a shower. There was still a small splash of blood clinging to the white bathtub, and the combination of red and white made a horrible contrast. Dr. Nanji. I understand. No signs of post-mortem morbidity. Rigor mortis hasn't begun either. It would seem that an hour or so has passed since they were killed. But even so, how a weapon with such a short handle could do that to the skull, I cannot imagine. Nanja checked their pulse and their pupils, making certain of their deaths once more. As Kanan watched this business-like treatment, he thought, couldn't you tell at a glance that they're dead without doing all that? Nanja thought about removing the weapon, but then decided it would be better to preserve the scene and hand it over to the police. So he left it alone. But a close inspection of the base showed that it didn't have a blade. In fact, it was more conical than blade-shaped. He noticed that, rather than a knife, it was more like a short-handled spear, something with a shape better suited for thrusting than slicing. Rather than a short spear, you might call it a thick ice pick. At any rate, after looking at the scene, no further words were needed to describe the sort of terrible purpose such eerily designed weapons were originally made for. Nor was it necessary to explain how they carried out their function. Natsuhi, hoping to escape the repulsive steam filling the bathroom as soon as she could, covered her mouth with a handkerchief and dashed from the room. Just viewing their gruesome bodies for an instant had been enough to burn the image into her eyes. If she looked any longer, that image would surely remain in her vision for all eternity. The rising urge to vomit was exactly the same feeling she'd had that morning at the gardening storehouse. For a while, Natsuhi couldn't help but stand with her back facing the guest room, fighting that sickness in her stomach. At any rate, we can't let the children, we can't let George come see this room. See this room with all haste. Yes, we mustn't let them see. If George saw his parents in this brutal state. But they could tell that those fiercely racing footsteps in the hallway belonged to George, even before he came dashing into the room. George and the other children had been waiting in the parlor. However, when they saw Genji speak to Natsuhi, when they saw her turn pale and fly out of the parlor, they felt a sense of foreboding. And when they saw a large group of people gathered around the guest room, they were sure of it. Father, Mother... What is this? Another magic circle? Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi are safe, right? Hey, Kanon-kun. What's all this about? Battler-sama. Kanon didn't have to say anything. George's scream after he ran into the room told them everything they needed to know. Ah! Who did this? I'll kill you, I'll kill you! George-kun, hang in there. Natsuhi touched George's shoulder with her hand, but he violently shook her off. George fell over beside Ava and buried his face in the bed in front of his mother's face, wailing. Then he pounded on the bed with his fist, over and over again. George-san, hang in there. Battler-sama. Battler had his back against the wall of the hallway, and was covering his eyes with his right hand and weeping without restraint. Horrible. That's horrible. He proposed to the girl he loved and lost her the next day, and on the same day even his mom and dad would get killed. Isn't that too harsh? Of course, it's sad whenever anyone dies, no matter who it is. But to Battler, those who left alone by the deaths of others were far more worthy of pity. Everyone here now had lost someone close to them. George wasn't the only one to be pitied. However, George's pain is far greater than everyone else's. Adler, I know everyone dies sooner or later. If you're human, you'll eventually reach a time where you've gotta fight the sorrow of losing someone close to you. But still, shouldn't that day be far in the future for Aniki? And shouldn't those deaths visit him one at a time? Horrible. It's too horrible. That bastard. That bastard. Doesn't he have even a speck of human sympathy in him? Ah! There's a lot of yelling, I don't like it. Also see... I need a second to drink some water from all the yelling. Okay. Ooh. Bella, don't cry. Don't cry. Maria tried to comfort Bella in a mechanical sounding voice. Bella violently wiped his tears. Yeah. Damn it, I won't cry anymore. Tears of regret, tears of sadness, I won't shed them again. It's all useless. The witch has got me backed into a corner. I'm always on the defensive. And that's useless, it's all useless. I'll spin the chessboard around. That bastard probably thinks we'll be running scared like sheep until tomorrow before we try anything. But guess what? I'll spin it around. That bastard can't escape this island until tomorrow either. We won't be hiding away, pissing ourselves. That bastard will. I'll expose you. You'll see. By tomorrow? No, screw tomorrow. Tonight. Before tonight's over, I'll be gripping you by the collar. At any rate, we'll lock this room and leave everything as it is until the police come. No objections, I take it? Natsuhi announced it, as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George, but he looked as though he'd shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from the others. And when he stood up, everyone else agreed too. Natsuhi still hadn't opened that western envelope of the family head that she'd picked up. But now that they decided to leave this room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor where everyone could watch. As soon as they walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, some of them immediately felt something out of place, or maybe sensed something strange. Ugh. Stinks? Did you notice it too, Maria? Seriously, what's that smell? It's awful. When everyone sniffed the air, they did notice a horrible, burnt smell drifting through the hallway, one that none of them had smelled until then. I will go quickly to check the kitchen. I'm sure I turned the flame off. After noticing a burn smell, it was natural that Kumasawa, who had just been using the burner in the kitchen, suspected that her own slip-up had caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away. Kono, go with Kumasawa. Do not let her be alone. Yes. After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon followed after her. He wasn't running, but as he followed her, he tried to search for the cause of the smell in other directions as well. Ew. Stinks. Ew. It truly is a stench that makes the nose wrinkle. However, that doesn't mean we can just open a window for ventilation. Natsuhi was reluctant to open the windows in a situation where self-defense was so important. Let us run the fan. I do not believe there will be any need to open the windows. George Aniki, is it okay if I talk to you? If it's about finding the culprit, then I have no problems. It seemed that George had managed to climb out of the abyss of sorrow. All that filled his chest now was a quiet flame of hatred towards the culprit who had stolen the lives of the one he loved and his beloved parents. The chain for this room was set. From what I could tell by looking at it, I'm positive that it couldn't be opened from the outside. In other words, this was a perfect closed room. That does seem to be the case. In the case of the Rose Garden storehouse, they might have sneaked the shutter's key out of the servant room. Or maybe they had a duplicate key. I can imagine many ways they could have done it. But this chain is different. Among generally used locking techniques, a chain is the simplest one to create a closed room with. Only a chain will block everyone coming in from the outside as long as it isn't physically broken. So, does this mean the culprit couldn't have gone in or out through the door? That's interesting. Just a few hours ago, I seem to remember everyone making a fuss over how to enter a room without using the door. Back then, we were all losing our cool, wondering how grandfather had disappeared from his room. Thank you. I need to drink some more tea. The receipt Aunt Ava stuck in the door on a whim proved that the door had remained sealed. And since Aunt Natsuhi was the only person to enter or exit during that time, she was under suspicion. Aunt Ava proposed a theory about how Aunt Natsuhi might have thrown grandfather out the window and left by the door herself. But this door is much simpler. It was sealed from the inside by the door chain. The window had also been locked from the inside, and the bodies had been inside the room. This time it really had been, without exaggeration, a true closed room. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 cases have occurred, and all 3 times, the door has been the point of interest. The first was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew about that, this can't really be called a closed room. The next was the door sealed by the receipt. However, Aunt Natsuhi entered that room, so if grandfather had left through the window or been thrown out, she would have been able to lock the window before escaping. Or, like my theory, grandfather could have hidden until the receipt was gone and left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of desperate tricks. In that sense, you really can't call this one a closed room either. And now we have the door sealed with a door chain. Finally, we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked. It was a perfect closed room. The first hadn't been a closed room because everyone could be suspected. The second hadn't been a closed room because Aunt Natsuhi could be suspected. But this time, no one can be suspected. This was a perfect closed room because the door chain formed a seal that blocked everyone equally well. In that case, did the culprit carry out the crime without entering the room? With some method from outside the room? Good point. Even though the chain makes it impossible to open it wide enough for a person to fit through, you can open it a small crack. Did the culprit knock on the door to make them peer out before attacking them? Wait, am I missing something? Yeah, you are. If Aunt Ava's body had been lying right next to the door, it might have been possible. But she was on the bed at the back of the room. And Uncle Hideyoshi was even in the bathroom. Looking from the crack in the door, you couldn't even see them, and you couldn't reach them with your hands either. Damn it, it's all useless. I don't have a clue. Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria. Ooh, satisfied? What do you mean, satisfied? Battler, since you didn't want to suspect any of your relatives, you made a wish, saying you wanted the culprit to be Beatrice, right? Well, Beatrice granted that wish. Just as you asked, she did something that was completely impossible for a human to make you believe in the witch. And now you're complaining. How selfish. Ow! I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly, on the head with my fist. Sure, thanks for granting that wish. That just now was to thank you, and also to teach her to stop laughing when it's inappropriate. More importantly, tell me. There was another mysterious scribble on the door to Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi's room. Was that another magic circle? That one had a really memorable and characteristic design. So I hoped you'd at least know what it was. Ow. I don't know, which is why I'm letting you take the credit. Quit whining and explain. You sure are a violent babbler. I won't tell you if you're too mean. Get it? Ow. Ooh, I'll say it. Stop hitting me. That is the first magic circle of the moon. What does it mean? What does this magic circle affect? What does the Hebrew writing mean? The words are from the Old Testament, Psalms 107 verse 16. For he has broken gates of brass and cuts through bars of iron. This magic circle has two effects. First, it can open a door regardless of which method has been used to lock it. That sure is convenient. So you're saying they're trying to make it look like they're a witch because this closed room has a door that can't be opened without relying on magic? Alright, and the other effect? When you're blocked by unopenable doors in all directions, it opens a door. By using it in a difficult situation, it gives you a solution you hadn't even thought of until then. Generally speaking, you receive the powers of observation, discernment, inspiration, and intuition. Beatrice is trying to provoke you, since there's no way lowly humans like Battler could figure out how this door was opened. Ow. Okay, good work, so shut up. Sounds great. I'll accept this challenge from the witch. Maria-chan, things like witches and demons don't exist in this world. Someone killed father and mother. I don't know whether that was someone I know or not, but either way, it was definitely a human. Yeah, but how? How did they reach those two through that crack in the door? It couldn't have been more than 10 centimeters wide. At any rate, I can hardly stand this stench. What in the world could it be? Kanon and Kumasawa, who had gone on ahead, realized the smell wasn't coming from the kitchen, even before they arrived there. That was because they noticed an even thicker wave of stench rising up from the stairs leading to the basement, which they passed on their way to the kitchen. The boiler room. I wonder if there's something wrong with the boiler again. Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and in poor condition. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled the boiler belching out a stench like this before. Slam. What was that sound? The thing they heard from the basement was definitely the sound of a door closing. Kumasawa had phrased it as a question, but she already knew it couldn't be anything else. Kumasawa was so surprised at that sound that her knees gave way yet again, and she cowered. After all, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together around Ava and Hideyoshi's room. So, who caused the sound of a door closing just now? Kanon-san. After taking a second to sort out the situation, Kanon ran down towards the basement. Since they'd heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no sign of anyone coming up the stairs, the person who closed the door had to be inside the boiler room now. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kanon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Kanon was a servant, so he knew. There were 2 entrances to the boiler room, one that opened to the mansion, and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa reached the same conclusion long after Kanon did, but she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the culprit, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then no matter how Kanon confronted them, he wouldn't be a match. Of course, with this argument, even if Kumasawa joined him, it wouldn't change anything. At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone, and she rushed down the stairs. Oh, so brave. At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place. And on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench, which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the source. In that case, Kanon should have been searching for where the smell was coming from. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward as he grabbed a hatchet from a tool shelf just off to the side of the door. And I think the automated thingies are not working, so I'm just gonna do this. Sorry about that. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he'd wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon. Any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then he answered. In roulette, you bet on a number, or the colors red or black, vying for a payoff. However, low-risk bets like black and red only offer a similarly low payoff. The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. It was such a fantastical scene. Golden, sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and gathered in the darkness, disappearing. Kanon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they they would certainly laugh. But Kanon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest. However, if you bet on something with a lower probability, your payoff increases proportional to the risk. The master called succeeding despite an astronomical risk a miracle, and called the astronomical payoff gained as a result magic. I have no interest in what kind of magic you and the master were seeking when you spun that roulette. But you forgot something. You forgot that in roulette, there's a pocket that's neither black or red. Yes, this is a horror game, and it's a little tense right now. People have been dying. So keep an eye on there's a little trigger warning or content warning on the screen. So keep that in mind. I'm gonna keep reading now. Roulette has a special pocket called 0, which means that the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. That means that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up, just as though everyone is forfeit. I set my heart on just one thing. I decided that if Shannon were to be killed, and I was left alive, I'd sacrifice this life of mine, and bring this roulette of yours to ruin. This isn't one of the Master's rules, and it certainly isn't one of yours. I made this rule myself. I'm not furniture anymore. I'm the zero on your roulette. Conan's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that his defiance against his own weaknesses was being ridiculed somehow. Conan's brow creased even further, and a fierce expression that he'd never shown to anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops, which slid downward. It was clear that the emotion causing Conan's hand to shake wasn't just anger. However, Conan suppressed that emotion. I won't let your words lead me astray again. This is where the demon's roulette ends. Wait another 1,000 years in hell for your next summoner. Beatrice. When Conan raised the hatchet and tried to dive into the darkness definitely sneered. It sneered at that courage as if it were vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. Conan, his hatchet still held aloft, couldn't take another step after that. With a clang, the hatchet that he'd been grasping fell and rolled onto the floor. And following that, with a pair of thuds, Conan's knees hit, left, then right. That hand, which looked like it was trying to catch the sky now that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered, landing on his chest. Then, the other hand did the same. Right there, a handle with a demon-shaped design was buried into his chest. The same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was in Conan's chest. Apologies. Conan was curled up in anguish, fresh blood dribbling from the corners of his mouth. It was makeup too extreme for Conan's white skin. Around this scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced through the darkness, mesmerizing. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance, a funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Conan had already been prepared for his own death, but although he could do nothing but accept the death he had received, he attempted one last measure of resistance. He grasped the handle of the weapon sticking into his chest with both hands, and gritting his teeth with an acute, unearthly pain, he pulled it out. For only a moment, a bright red spray gushed out. It made an unpleasant bloop sound. It probably resembled the sound of Conan's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead. Conan-san. Someone. There's so much screaming. Why? Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Conan was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. What a horrible fate. He wouldn't have been killed if I had been with him. What incredible luck. If I had been with him, I might have been killed too. As she screamed, Her expression was filled with complete confusion, and all of the muscles of her face were pulled up, almost as though she was smiling while crying. But no one could have made fun of an expression like this. What is it, Kumasawa? Answer me, Kumasawa! The first one to dash in was Natsuhi, holding the rifle. Battler and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Kanon, who was lying on the ground as if he were drowning in an ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore. Kanon, answer me! Genji, bring Dr. Nanjo here! Natsuhi realized that even though Kanon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious, so she sent Genji to get the doctor. Natsuhi, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted. Who is hiding over there? Come out quietly. If you don't come out from there, I'll shoot you without mercy. We need light. Natsuhi, let's light them up. Battler, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door and used its light to cut through the darkness Natsuhi was glaring into. But the light only shone on mechanical-looking piping and a door. The door had been left open a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through there in a hurry. Natsuhi, where does that door go? Genji, where does that door lead to? The courtyard. Like hell I'd let you get away, you damn bastard! Battler let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Cool air from outside suddenly rushed in. There were some thin, rough stairs leading up. Battler ran up them, shouting. Wait, Battler-kun! It's dangerous to be on your own right now. Natsuhi was also rushing up the stairs, chasing after Battler. They were in the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place. Because it was surrounded on all sides, the air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. As he ran through the cold and scattered raindrops, dashing up the stairs into the courtyard, Battler looked in every direction. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette just standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. Battler spun, looking all around. He turned, again and again. He kept spinning until he almost lost a sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in the scenery, but there was no chance. All he saw as he spun was more and more of the mansion's heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were two entrances into the mansion from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. Because the courtyard couldn't be entered from outside the mansion, the doors had been built without locks. He didn't know which one they had left through. He had to give up. Battler pounded the wall with his fist, swearing. Battler-kun, you mustn't run ahead by yourself. Battler-kun? Battler pressed his forehead against the wall, which he scratched at with his fingernails as he cried. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi, and now Kanon-kun. You killed a full 6 people. And that wasn't enough, so you had to kill 3 more. Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi were always kind and fun. I just met Kanon yesterday, but I'm sure I'd have gotten along fine with him. Why did you kill them? Why? Why? You know, when people die, they don't come back to life again, right? They aren't gonna quickly sprout up again like bamboo shoots. Why'd you kill them? Why? Why? Ah! Battler was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart. So he cried. with all his strength. Natsuhi, who had always thought of Battler as a frank person, was a little surprised to find he had this delicate side. And at the same time, she understood how easily hurt the heart of a young person could be, so she held him. It's alright. I will definitely protect you, George-kun, Maria-chan, and Jessica. As a mother and as the representative of the Yoshinomiya family. Crying noises. Battler, after sobbing into Natsuhi's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile, as though he had been like that the whole time, and tried to appear as though he'd cried more than enough already. Anyway, let's go back down for now. Protecting ourselves is a higher priority than finding the culprit. Tomorrow, the boat will arrive. After that happens, the police will come, and everything should be brought to light. There's no way the culprit can escape this island, no matter how much they struggle. That's right. When the police come, when the seagulls cry, the crime will be solved. But for some reason, Ballard felt a slight sense of uneasiness, as if the seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. When the typhoon passes, surely the lively seagulls will return to the harbor once again. I returned to the boiler room along with Aunt Natsuhi, and told everyone weakly that we hadn't found anything. We heard that Dr. Nanjo and George Aniki had carried Kanon-kun to the servant room. The servant room had a first aid kit and a sink, and could apparently function as a nurse's office. Kumasawa-san and Jessica had accompanied them. Stains from Kanon-kun's blood remain on the floor. Judging by the large amount of blood lost, and the ruthless shape of the weapon that had fallen carelessly to the ground, I figured that Dr. Nanjo's treatment would probably end in vain. That weapon was doubtlessly the same type that had been stuck in Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi's foreheads. But wait, isn't the demonic design on the handle a little different? There seem to be some small differences in that part. Still, as far as their overall shape was concerned, the weapons were all of the same type. Though it had seemed brutal, we'd left the weapon stuck into Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi to preserve the crime scene. So this was the first time we were able to have a perfect view of the entire weapon. As we had expected, the weapon was not bladed like a knife, but shaped like an ice pick, or rather, a thin stake, and it had a spiral-shaped pattern, sort of like a drill. It looked like something that might be driven into the hearts of human sacrifices in a demonic ritual. Including the handle, it was 25 centimeters long. Half of that was the stake-shaped part, which was stained with deep red blood. The length of the blood-stained part made it clear just how deeply it must have penetrated into Kanon-kun's chest. But Aunt Natsuhi and the rest didn't even look at the weapon, and instead stood in front of the incinerator, where the horrible stench was emanating from. They must have dragged it out. I think this is a good time for a break. And don't worry, he's not dead yet. But I mean, I can't, no promises. I'm very sorry to, introduce all these cool characters and then describe them ruthlessly being murdered in front of you. But yes, time for a break. I'll be right back. Alright, I have returned, so we will read some more. Now we will finally find out what is in the boiler room. They must have dragged it out. dragged out that thing which had been burning in the furnace. It was still smoldering and kept sending out dense waves of that awful, unpleasant smell. Genji and Maria stared down at it. Natsuhi probably couldn't stand to look directly at it. She kept shaking her head, her back to it. I thought nothing could surprise me after everything that's happened. But this is... I stood there for a while, moaning, with a rising urge to vomit. The true source of that unearthly stench was a scorched corpse that had been cooking inside the incinerator. The clothes, the surface of the body, and the hair were all hideously burned. That grotesque corpse was in a state where not the face, nor the age, nor even the gender could be guessed at. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized that a corpse appearing at this time could only be one person. It was grandfather, who had disappeared that morning, and whose whereabouts had been unknown. I believe it is most likely the master. I agree that he would pass away in such a state. It's heartrending. But is there any proof that this corpse really is grandfather? It's burned so black you can't even tell what sex it is. Butler-kun, look at the feet. Aunt Natsuhi, with her handkerchief over her mouth and her eyes averted, pointed and told me to look at the burnt corpse's feet. Notice how there are 6 toes on each foot. Huh? You're right. Just as Genji-san had said, there are 6 toes on each foot. Each individual toe had looked so normal in its line that I hadn't noticed. The master was born with 6 toes on both of his feet. Consequently, the master was entrusted with the revival of the Ushiromiya family. I have heard that since long ago, cases of polydactyly were common in the Ushiromiya family. It's probably hereditary. Polydactyly literally means many fingers. Because of a little mistake by God when the person is born, one of their toes or fingers splits into 2, and the total number increases. But a big deal isn't usually made of polydactyly in the world at large. That's because it isn't a disease, just something people are born with. So, while they are still babies, at about the time they turn 1 year old, they can be taken to the hospital and given surgery to make them normal. Ooh. Even a child with polydactyly can be... Even a child with polydactyly can be treated before they become aware, so they might not even remember it themselves. That was a weird sentence. By the way, it seems that there's a possibility for this to occur in 1 out of every 2,000 babies. So, even though it's not usually seen, it isn't that rare at all. It's still Wednesday where you are, kid. Hello. Oh my god, thank you for the sub. Okay. For you, I will. Where we left off last time... I know, I really appreciate it, thank you. Also, just... This is a huge detour, but, very important. Look. It's here. Okay, so where we left off last time, there was a huge argument. Eva and Hideyoshi went to their own room, had a little heart-to-heart, And then at the beginning of this episode, Genji and Kanon went to go get them for dinner. Realized, hey, we're knocking on the door. There's nobody answering. As it turns out, they are both dead. They have been killed by being staked in the forehead. You heard that right. Staked in the forehead. Eva was in the bedroom, but like in the back of it, and Hideyoshi was in the bathroom, and the chain to the door was on the door, so whoever killed them technically could not have entered the room. So that's score 1 for the witch, right? And then things got worse. There's been a weird stench since Eva and Hideyoshi died. We finally found out the source just now, and it's Kinzo's burnt body that someone put in the boiler. Before we found that out, Kanon had a little confrontation with an unknown attacker who tried to stake him in the heart and succeeded. And he's gravely injured at this point. And what we're talking about right now, the reason that we know it's Kinzo, is that he had polydactyly, which means that he has 6 toes. And the corpse that they just found in the boiler, 6 toes. So yes, things are not looking great. In fact, just as a little refresher to you all, here's everyone who's still alive at this point. We've got attending physician Nanjo, Genji, head servant, Kanon is still alive, Kumasawa still trucking, hasn't made a joke about mackerel in hours. Maria, still creepy. Battler, still being himself. George, who's very sad about his parents, of course. Jessica, who's mostly very confused, I believe. And Natsuhi, who is a badass. Let's just be real about that. A badass. What a badass. I love her. And yeah, we're just talking about toes right now. I'm not even kidding. Oh, let me just save, actually. And we're actually relatively close to the end of this episode, so I'm not sure when exactly we'll finish, but episode 2, the second one in the series, out of 8, that one's on the horizon. So yeah. Okay, so polydactyly. 1 out of every 2,000 babies. Speaking of which, I think Uncle Hideyoshi mentioned something to me long ago. Something about how even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who unified Japan at the end of the Sengoku period, had 6 fingers on one hand. According to Aunt Natsuhi, among the many Uchimiya family heads, the ones most praised for their wisdom all had polydactyly. Because of that, when grandfather was born, his relatives were all excited at the thought that he might become another wise leader. And when the leading relatives all died in the Great Kanto earthquake, it was apparently argued that grandfather should be the one to restore the family because of the auspicious sign of his birth. If grandfather hadn't disliked his position as the head so much, this 6th toe probably would have been pretty lucky for him. Come to think of it, I've heard about some country where it's believed people with polydactyly should be treated as gods and revered. This is beside the point, but it's fairly common in mystery novels for a corpse to be burned to hide its identity. But I guess that in grandfather's case, just toasting him wouldn't be enough. And grandfather's body was not simply burned. It was just like Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi, and the thing that had been stabbed into Kanon-kun's chest. One of those demon ice picks was stuck into his forehead. The head's ring is not on his finger. So the letter last night was telling the truth. Father would probably be horribly disappointed. Natsuhi-san let her head droop and close her eyes tightly. You're a god too, John? Oh. You can still be a god. This room had also become a vital crime scene for us to hand over to the police. It was decided that we would leave grandfather's corpse here and lock the room, sealing it. It isn't clear when grandfather's corpse started burning in the incinerator. Hey Lulu. Welcome to the stream. Actually, a little reminder. Since, according to Genji, the strength of the flames hadn't been that strong, the body must have started burning a long time ago. So that stench could slowly creep out of the furnace and fill the room bit by bit, eventually pouring out and climbing up the staircase. Putting aside whether he was rare or well done, grandfather had been brought out, killed, and burned, even though he had started out locked away in the closed room created by his auto-lock. There's probably no doubting this. However, according to Genji-san, the boiler room is usually locked. The possibility that someone outside our group had snuck in and committed the crime was overwhelmingly high. And there was also a good chance that this person was walking around with something like a master key. After all, the doors and windows throughout the mansion had been checked. But despite that, the culprit was able to strut around the mansion freely. Does this crime confirm that a 19th person exists? There's still that contradiction, since they're trying to tout their existence without ever showing themselves once. Along with Kiryu-san's chessboard theory, I've been using this contradiction to deny the existence of a 19th person. By spinning the chessboard around once more, the very fact that this crime makes it perfectly obvious that a 19th person exists means that the existence of a 19th person is even less plausible. As long as that 19th person doesn't show themselves in front of us. If the culprit could get grandfather out through the door sealed by the receipt, if they could kill Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi from the other side of the room, the other side of a door sealed by a chain, then could they possibly go so far as to create a fictional 19th person through strange tricks and devices? If we still want to believe that the culprit is among the 18, then the list of suspects has grown very short. The four of us kids, Aunt Natsuhi, Genji-san, Kumasawa-bachan, and Dr. Nanjo. One of these people has to be the culprit. Wait, we can't be sure of that. Just a second ago, we started doubting whether the corpse here was actually grandfather's, right? Maybe we can think of the other bodies in the same way. For example, the first 6 all had their faces horribly smashed. Some of the bodies had kept enough of their faces for us to confirm who they were, but that old bastard, for example, had lost his entire face, as though the whole thing had been neatly peeled off. We only figured out which body was which by their clothes and surroundings. Did the culprit prepare a fake body beforehand, and alter it to make it look like they died, even though they were actually hiding somewhere after committing the crime? It may sound ridiculous, but it wouldn't be an impossible trick to pull off. It's too early to give in to this 19th person. No, this witch. Oh, now it works, dang. Hello. Maria-chan, you mustn't stare so fixedly anymore. Come on, battle too. I'm worried about Kanon's condition, and we mustn't remain in a place like this any longer than necessary. Let us return. Ugh. Maria didn't go out with everyone else, but remained in the boiler room. The thing she was staring so fixedly at probably wasn't grandfather's body, but the demon's ice pick sticking out of his forehead. It was probably the sort of item that an enthusiast couldn't bear to ignore. I tapped her on the head. Hey, Maria. What's Beatrice after? Is it all of our lives? Beatrice will revive very soon. At that time, none shall be left alive. How can you laugh at something like that? Do you think you're the only one who's safe? Why don't you feel like you're in danger? Why aren't you scared? Beatrice made a promise. She said she's gonna take me to the Golden Land. It's a wonderful place where you have no obligations. Everyone's always together, and everyone is always nice to everyone else. I'm looking forward to it. That time will come very, very soon now. Just what kind of person is Maria? I only know what Maria was like 6 years ago, when she was 3. She was once pure and obedient, a good kid. This new Maria 6 years later and the Maria I knew didn't seem to fit together. Just who is she, this witch who calls herself Maria? To Maria, who obstinately believes in the witch, this series of unsolvable crimes is proof that the witch actually exists. Every time something occurs that would be difficult for a human, it becomes a little harder for the rest of us to not believe in Beatrice. It must be an intense pleasure for Maria to see her relatives, who once firmly denied the witch's existence, start acknowledging that witch's existence one by one. Is that why she's in high spirits? Maria, let me ask this one more time. You'll probably answer the same anyway, but I'll ask it just once more. Yesterday you were given a letter in the rose garden. Who gave it to you? Like I said, Beatrice. Valor still doesn't believe. Maria only repeated what she had already said. Maria met with the 19th person, the witch. Was that really a 19th person, or did one of the 18 just get her to say that? All that's certain is that Maria has been with the rest of us constantly, has always had an alibi, and hasn't done anything suspicious. She's simply overjoyed at being made Beatrice's messenger, and certainly isn't the 19th person. Supposedly. That's right. I wonder what's written in the letter we picked up in Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi's room. Aunt Natsuhi should still have it with her. In the end, Kanon-kun did not regain consciousness. Even though Dr. Nanjo and the rest did all they could to heal him. Of course, there is very little that could be done on an island like this without medicine or proper facilities. However, Kanon was the only human ever to confront the culprit. If only he could give us some kind of clue. However, at the time they carried Kanon away, it was already too late. My sincere apologies. Without proper facilities, there was nothing I could do about such a serious wound. No, that's perfectly understandable. Thank you so much for giving it your very best. Dr. Naja's shirt had been sprayed by a violent spurt of blood, so it was easy to imagine the devotion with which he had tried to save Kanon's life, up until the last second. Jessica was crouched in the corridor, crying softly. She had probably been taking care of Kanon-kun until the moment of his death. George Aniki tried to reproach her with words of comfort, but when Jessica pushed him away, he stopped trying to force her to talk and left her alone. If only I hadn't let Kanon-san go alone. Oh. Do not let that bother you. If you had been with him, you would probably have been attacked as well. He foolishly rushed on ahead and paid for his mistake. How can you say it like that? Kanon-kun spotted the culprit and bravely stood up to them. If only Kumasawa-san had gone with him, the culprit might have hesitated and chosen to run away. Emotion-filled words that I never thought I'd hear coming from Jessica's mouth tumbled out. Kumasawa, looking truly sorry, could do nothing but hang her head. Jessica. You shouldn't talk to her now. It's the same for me, and probably you as well, right, Bello-kun? We don't know what's going on, and it feels like our hearts are going to split open. There were tears in George Aniki's eyes again. Seeing Jessica break down crying probably brought back the pain of losing his parents. I'd done my crying all at once, so I didn't feel like crying anymore. However, I understood how great the pain in their hearts was. It's okay, Jessica. You'll be able to meet Kanon again soon. Stop it! I don't need you trying to console me like that. Beatrice will resurrect the dead, and even love that has been lost. So you'll definitely be able to meet him soon. Then everyone will be able to live in peace. So the one who killed Kanon-kun is this Beatrice who supposedly gave you that letter yesterday? Where is she? Where is she hiding? I'll find her and tear her apart. Tell me, you know who the culprit really is, don't you? What do you know and what are you hiding? Tell me, damn it! Milady, please stop. Ooh. Beatrice exists. Ooh. Damn it, let go of me, Genji-san. Maria knows who the culprit is, and she's hiding their identity even though she knows. She must be telling them what we're doing, guiding them as they kill us. Jessica, be silent. Jessica grabbed at Maria. Genji tried to stop her, but Jessica could not be calmed. The next thing I heard was the sound of Aunt Natsuhi slapping Jessica's face. After that, only Jessica's sorrowful, sobbing voice resounded throughout the hall. Maria-chan, I know there's no way you're the culprit. You've been with us since the beginning, and there was no time for you to communicate with any culprit. So I want you to tell me something. This Beatrice who handed you the letter yesterday, who was she? Although those words seemed kind, they clearly showed that George still had some remaining doubts about Maria. He didn't actually grab at her. However, he felt exactly the same way Jessica did. Aniki, I already asked her the same thing a second ago. Her answer was the same as before. I want to hear it from Maria's mouth. Who is Beatrice? Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe anyway. What do you mean by that? Could it be the culprit's someone we know well? And you're keeping silent because you're covering for them for some reason? Who gave you that letter? I got it from Beatrice. I'll say it no matter how many times you ask. I got the letter from Beatrice. Jojo Oni-chan, do you refuse to believe in Beatrice because she's not an opponent you can hit? You want to turn your feelings of helplessness into violence and beat someone up. So you won't be satisfied unless your opponent is a human you can hit. So even if I tell you the truth, you won't accept it. So it's pointless for me to tell you. You won't believe. But I'll keep on saying it. Because it's true. Beatrice exists. The door to the Golden Land will soon be opened. I'll go there. Beatrice promised. In that world, Mama is nice, Papa is with us, and is also nice. I want to go there right away. Everyone is afraid of Beatrice, but that's only natural. So calm yourselves. Beatrice said so herself. By the time the typhoon is past, I'll have ended everything, she said. Now. Maria, I don't mind you being talkative, but let's leave it at that for now. I'll bet this is all a pretty happy situation for you since you're always going on about how witches exist, but keep that to yourself for now. Don't try to force that on other people. Ew. Hey Prestige, welcome to the stream. Stuff's intense. I know I've been creeped out by this girl for a while now, but there really is something wrong with her. Don't you think so too, Battler Genji-san? Kumasawa-san? What about you, Mom? Maria knows who the culprit is and she's hiding it. Okay, maybe she hasn't done anything directly, but she's definitely working with the criminal. That's right, she's a spy. We can't let her stay with us any longer. Maria-chan, you must realize there are times when indiscreet discussion is best avoided. If you keep adding oil to the fire, even I will get very angry. Aunt Natsuhi glared at Maria with frightening eyes. Maria was used to Aunt Rosa's loud style of scolding, but she apparently had to build up a resistance to Aunt Natsuhi's quiet sort of scolding. She shrugged and kept her mouth shut. A desolate feeling filled the room. It felt as though things would just get more complicated if anyone spoke. How many people have already died? 6 people on Dad's group. After that, both Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi, Kanon-kun, grandfather. There are a whole 18 people on this island, supposedly, and 10 of those people have been killed. That's more than half of us. And right now, there's absolutely no proof that the remaining 8 will be safe. At any rate, this is no time to quarrel. Now that we are certain the culprit can enter and leave the mansion at will and strike out of nowhere, we must give our undivided attention to surviving until tomorrow. I agree strongly with Aunt Natsuhi. We can figure out who the culprit is at our leisure tonight. For now, though, we're better off finding a place to barricade ourselves in. As I said this, I pointed out the clock to everyone. It was already 8 at night. We had been receiving shocks over and over again since the early morning, and our bodies and minds were both completely tired out. There's still a long, long time until tomorrow. We needed to find some place to barricade ourselves in so we could rest our bodies and get even the smallest amount of relief. I agree. Everyone is already pushing their mental and physical limits, myself included. I believe it would be wise to take that into account as we move forward. That's right. There's a high probability that the enemy's got the equivalent of a master key. Were Kanon-kun and Goda-san holding master keys? Yes. They were supposed to have them on their person during work. We didn't want to disturb the scene, so we didn't investigate that closely. We can't eliminate the possibility that someone stole a key from them. In the first place, we know the culprit may have visited the servant room at some point to unlock the garden shed shutter. It's conceivable that they obtained a master key from them early on. There were many servants serving the Ushirome family. Because of that, there were several master keys. Furthermore, every time one employee started or finished working, the keys were passed between servants. And we had to acknowledge that this had probably gotten a bit sloppy at times in the past. Even if they borrowed a bundle of keys from the pockets of one of the murdered servants, is there any safe place that even those keys couldn't open? Because of the nature of our job, we have been entrusted with the keys to all of the rooms. All of them in the mansion and the guest house. So in other words, no matter where we hole up and lock ourselves in, it'd just be pointless. Fine, who cares about locking up? If you're gonna come, bring it on, damn it. I'll beat you at your own game. The enemy won't approach us from the front. I don't know about the first 6, but if you look at what happened to my parents and Kanongu, and even grandfather, the enemy has only gone after isolated people. They don't have the power to assault all of us openly in a secure room. That's right. It's just like Aniki says. And maybe Aunt Natsuhi's rifle can serve as a deterrent to stop them from attacking. I hope that is so, but... Maria, I know you want to say something, but keep it to yourself and stay quiet for a while. Ew. Maria probably wanted to say something about how witches weren't afraid of things like guns. But if she were to say it out loud, the atmosphere around here would start to get pretty edgy. I had noticed and decided to put a stop to it. If I may, I do know of just one place that cannot be entered, even with the servant key rings. Where is that? That would be the master's study. I'm against this. I don't even want to think about going in grandfather's creepy room. How many keys can gain access to that room? There are 2. I always have one on my person. The other was held by the master himself, but just now I found this on the corpse in the boiler room. Genji-san took a handkerchief out of his pocket and opened it, showing us the burnt and filthy study key. Then, he showed it alongside his own key, which he had once lent to Natsuhi. Normally, it would have been proper to leave the master's key for the police, but because of the master's orders to protect the safety of the study, I borrowed it for the time being. I see, which means that Kinzo-san's study is the only place where we can be safe. It would appear that way. I don't even want to think about being shut up in a strange room all night. But it appears we must acknowledge that his room is safer than anywhere else right now. Even though grandfather locked himself up in that safe room, the culprit brought him out and killed him. We can't be certain that it's truly safe. According to your theory, grandfather cleverly found a way around that receipt trick and left the room of his own free will. If so, the room might be a good place to barricade ourselves in after all. You're too optimistic, Aniki. However, at the same time, I thought he brought up a pretty interesting point. After all, this gives us a chance to question the enemy, the witch herself, about how the sealed door had been opened. If we assume the culprit used some technique to kidnap father from his study, they'd have to show us the same trick again if they wanted to assault us in the study. And that'd give us a chance to make the culprit prove how they did it, right before our eyes. If she's really a witch, we'll be forcing her to use her little magic trick to open the door right in front of us. But that's probably impossible. If you spin the chessboard around, it's obvious the culprit is acting in a way that'll make us think they're a witch. If she really is a witch, all she's gotta do is appear in front of us and wow us with a colorful display of magic. Since she's avoided doing that, everything must be the work of a fake witch who wants us to think she's real. Therefore, A culprit who used a technique other than magic to defeat the closed room couldn't open the door before our eyes. Is grandfather's room big enough to stuff 8 people in? Yes. There is a bed, a sofa, and blankets, and so while it is not luxurious, it will be more than suitable for spending the night. There is also a sink, a bathroom, a refrigerator, and a liquor cabinet. Kenji, there are children there. Whoa, that's incredible. But isn't that weird? You're saying he built another house inside his house? That's pretty cramped for the last house of someone like our grandfather who bought a whole island and realized all of his dreams. That's right. After some point in time, Father probably couldn't feel at peace in any other place, even inside the mansion. We always sneered about how he shut himself up in there, and this time we're the ones who are going to shut ourselves up. Jessica spat the words out. Jessica, John, it sounds like you'd rather go search for the culprit than stay shut up somewhere. Of course, I don't think we'll be able to find them if we just start searching on our own. In the end, we can't do anything but wait. Then it doesn't matter where we wait, does it? I'm not gonna run away or hide. Why don't we just take it easy in the parlor watching TV or something while we wait for this Beatrice-sama to appear? It's perfectly fine if she doesn't appear. There's no need for us to be the ones who expose the culprit. Well said. We shouldn't take needless risks before the police arrive. Thank you, Dr. Nanjo. I think we should move to Father's study. True, we have no proof that it's safe, since Father was taken out of there. However, I can't deny the possibility that, as Battle-kun reasoned, Grandfather left the study of his own accord and was attacked outside. A while back, I proposed that strange theory as a stopgap measure. But, just as Aunt Eva said, even though that trick would be possible, I couldn't explain what motive could have made Grandfather sneak out of his study in such a troublesome way. Plus, Grandfather couldn't even have used that trick unless he knew that the receipt was wedged in the door. Aunt Eva hadn't pointed out that last part, but it's clear how absurd the theory was. So, does that mean the sealed door formed a closed room, just as Aunt Eva claimed? Is it an undeniable fact that Aunt Natsuhi was the culprit? If Aunt Eva were here now, she'd probably make that claim openly and blow my strange theory away. But anyway, I had to admit that a room with both a bed and a toilet that all 8 people could be shut up in, and with only 2 keys, both of which were gathered here, had to be the safest place in the mansion right now. At the very least, I figured this would be better than just staying shut up in the parlor and hoping nothing would go wrong. But wait, have we been safe only because we've been shut up in the parlor? What if leaving that room and moving to an unexplored location is actually more dangerous? It's useless, it's all useless. My flimsy head is about to break out in a fever. If I keep spinning the chessboard around, right and wrong will keep switching places over and over, and I won't be able to believe anything. When it seems like the culprit is one of the 18, I want to believe in Beatrice. And once I start believing in Beatrice, I start wanting to find the culprit amid the 18. If that keeps spinning around forever, in the end, my thoughts won't have taken one step from where they started. How far back in the past was it that Kiria-san taught me about chessboard thinking? That concept of examining the situation by spinning it around and thinking from the enemy's side. I seem to remember being so interested by it back then. I used it to guide all my thinking. By the way, Kiria-san was Dad's co-worker back then. I never dreamed that she'd someday be added to our family. Didn't Kiria-san tell me something once? I get the feeling she once said that while this chessboard thinking is one way to look at things, it certainly wasn't all powerful and that it wouldn't be good to rely on it too much. Chessboard thinking is my own interpretation of something called game theory, which I read about in a book long ago. It's a very interesting subject, so you should tackle it yourself when you get into college, felt like good. I really want to try it. If I could study and perfect my chessboard thinking, it'd be fun to be able to read into any opponent's move, wouldn't it? But you can't believe it blindly. Game theory is a very deep and complicated subject. Chessboard thinking is just my interpretation that skims the surface of game theory. In order to thoroughly read your opponent's moves like you're imagining, you need to study your opponent. Additionally, while chessboard theory is convenient and practical, it isn't perfect. It has many weak points despite its convenience. Weak points? Yes, chessboard thinking is founded upon game theory. When you thoroughly investigate game theory, it boils down to math. Do you know what the weak point of math is? It's noise. In math, when you write 1 plus 1 equals 2, that process will always result in 1 plus 1 equals 2, no matter how many billions of years pass. Nothing more, nothing less. That's because there's absolutely no noise mixed in. But, for example, unlike math, the Japanese language has noise mixed in. Kanji are a good example. Old kanji and new kanji are slightly different, which represents an introduction of noise created by the changes between time periods. Isn't history the same? There are dozens of policies that seem foolish in the modern era, but were meaningful at some point in the past. Because the rules of chess are fixed, when a pair of experts are discussing one particular layout, it's possible they could reach the same conclusions, whether they're from 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future. However, if the rules of chess had gone through massive changes over time, it's possible that a discussion about the same layout would have changed as well. That's right. Events in the world of humans are normally full of noise. Aren't human emotions that way? Even if the exact same thing occurs more than once, there's no guarantee that humans will always act in a predictable fashion. The moment we try to use a math-based theory to predict someone's actions, we must be aware that our theory has built-in weaknesses and limits. Simply put, chessboard thinking is extremely weak against noise and fickleness, as well as mistakes or incorrect knowledge. That's right. Kiryu-san definitely said that. Chess has always been a game where both sides play by the same rules and fight with the same conditions for victory. That's why it's possible for both sides to predict the other's moves. It's possible to read your opponent because you can always suppose they'll make the best moves they can find. But what if your opponent is fickle or a bit tired and makes a move that can hardly be called the best? Or what if this game actually has a special rule, some unknown thing that only the enemy knows about and can use? In fact, what if the opponent actually has some other goal than victory? Think from your enemy's perspective. That's the basis of chessboard thinking, which means if you misread your enemy, the answer you draw from this process will be complete rubbish, useless. So far, I've used chessboard theory to guess several vague bits of information about the culprit hiding behind this case, or so I think. However, I don't know anything about the culprit. Am I just playing around in a labyrinth of thought? If Kiryu-san were here at a time like this, she'd probably be able to notice something with her much, much sharper thinking ability. Until the very last moment, Jessica resisted moving into grandfather's study. But in the end, Aunt Natsuhi persisted, and we decided to move there. Everyone was completely wrapped in paranoia by now. Kumasawa-san had prepared dinner at one point, but during the time we were discovering the deaths of George Aniki's parents, both the kitchen and the parlor had been left empty. Someone suggested that the food might have been poisoned while we were gone. Because of that, we were unable to even touch the food that Kumasawa-san had taken the trouble to make for us. The manner in which the first 6 were killed was still unknown, but it certainly could have been poison. Certainly, that would allow even a single person to carry out the murder of 6 large adults. Furthermore, this idea made it easy to imagine there being only a single culprit, one who'd be afraid of Natsuhi's rifle. And this was very good for our emotional stability. But the fatigue and hunger were even harsher than we'd imagined. Then, Kumasawa-san made a proposal, and we all went together to the kitchen. There we gathered some canned food and other things that'd be hard to poison to take in with us. All of Kumasawa-san's efforts to reward us with just a little dinner on this savage day regrettably came to nothing. The food piled up on the serving cart looked just a little sad. We all started climbing the stairs. Aunt Natsuhi, who was in the lead, warily stared into the darkness, with both eyes in the barrel of the gun. Once we dragged ourselves up to the 3rd floor, just as Aunt Natsuhi had warned us of beforehand, there was a mixture of a chemical smell and a sickly sweet aroma, a stench hanging in the air that felt like it was eating into our heads. I see, this kind of stench probably would give you a headache if you were shut in with it for a whole night. I know it's a little late, but I'm with Jessica. I'd vote against going into grandfather's study. It felt like the stench was floating out from this magnificent door. It was the door to the forbidden study, which should defend against any who should enter. While Genji-san unlocked the door, Maria stared at the door and doorknob with great interest. Ugh. Incredible door. It looks old and strict and like it'd stop any jokes cold. A perfect door for grandfather's study. The power to ward off spiritual menaces is strong here. Beatrice probably couldn't open this door. Huh? What does that mean? Maria pointed at the doorknob. A scorpion crest. No, a design like a magic circle, arranged around a scorpion, was inscribed there. That design. That's right. Isn't this just like those keychain charms Maria gave Jessica and me yesterday? The 5th magic circle of Mars is a strong ward against magic. Additionally, this magic circle is very diligently constructed and is full of power. Such a magic circle can be quite troublesome to beings of magic like Beatrice. Isn't that comforting? Are you saying we can escape even Beatrice's clutches in this room? Our little witch here sure is reliable. Then, how did Beatrice get grandfather out? Just as Battler reasoned. Beatrice can't go inside. However, she has both magic and familiars. Using them, she might have been able to get grandfather to leave the study of his own accord. I've read about that in manga. I've seen a bunch of scenes where vampires were frightened of crosses so they couldn't get close, but their familiars were just fine, so they made their familiars attack. Those scorpion keychain charms I gave you yesterday also had the 5th magic circle of Mars on them. The power dwelling within them was weak, but they should be enough to protect you until we leave the island. Although it sounds like you've lost yours, right? Scorpion keychain charms? Yeah, the charm I gave you yesterday was something I got from Maria. I heard it would repel magic if you put it on your doorknob, and at the time I thought maybe it'd be better if you had it. Is that so? I thought it was an odd thing for you to be carrying around. Natsuhi put that on her doorknob? Yes. Last night, after hearing about it from Jessica, I hung it from the doorknob on the inside of my door. Then, Natsuhi, you're really fortunate. If you did that, Beatrice probably couldn't even lay a finger on you yesterday. I think Beatrice must have been really annoyed. Beatrice? Annoyed? Couldn't lay one finger? Natsuhi thought back on that eerie scribble she'd seen that morning, as though someone had been tearing at the outside of her door with blood-soaked hands, and gasped in surprise. Could it be that this witch, who called herself Beatrice, tried to enter through the door to Natsuhi's own room? But the magic-repelling charm had been hanging from the inside, so she couldn't break through the door, so she was annoyed. So she scratched at it? Quit it, don't talk about that. Witches don't exist. The culprit does. And they're human, just like us. If you need proof, why don't we dice her up and see if her blood's red? Damn it. How could you do that to Kanokun? Click. Genji unlocked the door. 8 people entered Kinzo's study. Grandfather's study. I'd heard rumors about it beforehand, so I wasn't that shocked. He had done nothing more than fortify it thoroughly with his occult hobbies. If Grandfather's hobby had been chasing after pop idols, these walls might be buried beneath idol posters. Even if I didn't understand it, I did realize that this room was a bundle of all his pastimes. Even so, I couldn't help but remain dumbfounded by the smell of his creepy medicine and the sweet stench that seemed to melt my head. When the door was closed, it automatically made a clunk. I see, this is the auto lock that's activated whenever the door is closed. And there are only 2 keys that could open this door from the outside, both of which were in this room. In other words, it had become a closed room. The shutter, the receipt, the chain, and now the auto lock. This 4th door had the most magnificent lock yet, and this was doubtlessly a closed room. Just to make absolutely sure that the door was secure, we checked all over for ways in or out. The windows was tightly locked. That should have been enough, but just in case, we tried knocking all over the walls. After all, we had talked about there being a hidden door in this room, but we couldn't find anything suspicious. Grandfather's study was very large. Even though we called it a study, it wasn't really a single room. It could be divided up into 4 basic sections: a study section, a bedroom section, a toilet/bathroom section, and a section for cooking that had a sink. I see, this study really does have enough in it to live in. Now I see how Grandfather could live his whole life in this room without ever leaving. It seemed Grandfather wasn't in the habit of watching TV because there was no television or even a radio in his room. We can't do anything except pass the time listening to the sound of the rain until tomorrow morning. Dr. Nanjo looked closely at the chessboard that sat on the table in front of the sofa and muttered. It was apparently the partly finished chess match he'd been playing with Grandfather until yesterday. The black had the white pretty well cornered, and it looked like checkmate would be reached within a few moves. The last part of the endgame. Even though checkmate had almost been reached, the endgame had been rushed, and in the end, was never completed. Kinzo-san, it seems we weren't able to see this match through after all. Dr. Nanjo, I was Kinzo-san's friend for a long time, but I never knew about more than half of him. I believe 2 Kinzos existed, a wise one and one trapped by some madness. I never understood anything about him. Especially when it came to Beatrice-sama, it would seem like his personality changed. In the direction of Kumasawa-san's upward gaze, a portrait of Beatrice could be seen. It wasn't massive like the one hanging in the entrance hall, but small, made for this room. Grandfather probably spent every day in this room, and so much of his time talking to the witch in that portrait. Who was Beatrice to Grandfather in the first place? Right now, you couldn't just explain it away by saying it was a story made by the parents to frighten children away from wandering into the forest. While eating the canned food we brought from the kitchen, we talked together about who Beatrice was. Whether the culprit was Beatrice herself or someone pretending to be her. Whether they were a witch or a human, that was besides the point. The woman in this portrait was closely related to the roots and background of this case. You couldn't talk about this case without talking about her. That's right. Mom, you picked up the culprit's letter in Aunt Ava's room, right? Yes. I still haven't opened it. Let's give it a try. Aunt Natsuki took out that western envelope. Kenji-san pulled a paper knife out of a drawer in the study desk and handed it to her. While watching her open it, George Aniki grimaced slightly. After all, it was a letter left at the site where his parents had been murdered. There was a good chance its contents would say something unbearable to Aniki. Aunt Natsuki also seemed to realize that. So she glanced over the contents first, without reading it aloud. We were a little frightened that she might grimace after reading something shocking, but she just frowned, unhappily. What does it say? There is one unpleasant sentence. It must be trying to provoke us. Natsuki, after deciding that the contents could be shown to the children, set it openly on the table. Everyone stared at it at the same time. Praise my name. What the hell? That's annoying. It's probably Beatrice declaring herself the victor. Damn it. I'll bet you were hoping another weird magic circle would show up. It wasn't a magic circle, but my expectations haven't been betrayed. What could it mean? I wonder if she wants to tout her own existence. That seems reasonable. With this letter, we now know that the author of last night's letter is the culprit. I think the identical envelope is more significant than what is written here. Without a doubt, this is the type of envelope and sealing wax that the master used. Oh, I don't know what's going on anymore. This is the first time I've seen anything like this since I started working for the Ishinomiya family. Going by last night's letter, Beatrice is claiming to be Grandfather's oldest confidant. Grandfather often said the same thing in the past, right? I spoke to Genji-san and Kumasawa-san, who nodded together. Guess that means you two know more about her than anyone except Grandfather. Could you tell us? For a long time I've purposely avoided this topic. But now that it has come to this, I can no longer do so. Genji, tell us everything you know. Genji-san didn't answer. Did he remain silent, despite his knowledge? Or did he know nothing at all? Still, I had a good guess. The ghost story of the witch Beatrice had long been deified among the servants. He had probably been very close to Grandfather and his occult hobbies, so there was a good chance that he'd been indoctrinated with even weirder things, and had increasingly come to deify the witch. As Grandfather's most trusted servant, who had sworn loyalty to him, he might be the most influenced by the illusion of the witch that Grandfather had created. So there was only one reason for Genji-san to remain silent. He could speak, but it would definitely cause a backlash, so it was better if he kept his mouth shut. And it wasn't like we'd believe him anyway. Something along those lines. A short while ago, Maria had been more than willing to speak bluntly and unrestrainedly, and that had earned her a scuffle with Jessica. It was natural for Genji-san to keep his silence. Was she father's concubine? His concubine? That could be possible. For ordinary poor people, polygamy isn't only viewed negatively from a moral perspective, it's also an unmaintainable financial situation. But that isn't the case for the very rich. It's possible for them to have another lover in addition to their real life. We can't deny the possibility that grandfather had another woman in his life besides grandmother. Maybe when grandmother was alive, I hear she was pretty sure of it. She thought he was cheating on her. I always thought she meant grandfather's imaginary witch. Now this is getting really interesting. You told me, didn't you, Genji-san? You said Beatrice has been working for grandfather since before the mansion was finished. I heard that the construction of the mansion was completed in Showa 27, or 1952. That'd mean this person called Beatrice was in a relationship with grandfather since at least 30 years ago. Could that concubine of 30 years ago, or maybe a relative or hidden child with that person, hold some kind of grudge and be planning revenge? I see, this is starting to sound just like your standard Western mansion mystery. It's a filthy topic, but the easiest line of reasoning to accept. What do you think, Genji? The master surely had feelings of deep love for her. There can be no mistake that he cared for her more than his late wife. Who is this person called Beatrice, and what's she doing now? I have heard that she passed away before the mansion was completed. She's already dead? Yes. The master was deeply stricken by grief at her loss, and he devoted himself to the art of black magic as a means to revive her. The master loved Beatrice-sama from the bottom of his heart. It was that madness which drove him to do all that you see here. As Genji-san said this, he spread his arms, as though asking us to look at this room, filled with the signs of grandfather's madness. We were all at a loss for words. I'm also going to save my game. And take a sip of water. Also, thank you all for being here. Normally, black magic seems like it'd just be creepy, and it's really hard to imagine why someone might be so enraptured by it. Since Kinzo was just an eccentric who had restored the Ushiromiya family amidst his madness, nobody had tried to understand him. The only thing on grandfather's mind had been the loss of a beloved woman, and his inescapable sorrow. Earlier, this room had seemed creepy, but in an instant, it had changed into something we could understand completely. The creepy books, the magic circles, the medicine, all of it. It all existed simply because he wanted to revive the face of a single woman who had left this world over 30 years ago. Master told me about Beatrice Emma's story once, when he was very drunk, although I have forgotten the details. It was a deep, deep love, enough to make a woman like me jealous. When Kinzo-san succeeded the headship of the Ushiramiya family, his marriage to his late wife had already been decided by the few surviving family elders. So, he was forced into a marriage with some woman who would benefit the Ushiramiya family? That is correct. Kinzo-san was installed as the head who would revive the family, and had to bear the entirety of that heavy responsibility. I do not pretend to know the details of when or where Kinzo-san first met her. Guess it'd be rude to say any more than that. That was when Grandfather truly fell in love for the first time. Just how deep was his affection for her? That was easy to see just by looking around us. The room was covered with piles upon piles of things having to do with black magic, and Grandfather spent every day shut in here, immersed in his research, and isolated from the outside world, never regretting 1 minute of it. You couldn't help but recognize the depths of Grandfather's love for Beatrice. I had it all wrong, Genji-san. What do you mean by that? I've always thought that maybe you servants believed blindly in the witch because you were influenced by Grandfather's creepy black magic hobby, but that's not how it was, right? By acting as though Beatrice's soul at least had been restored, and existed inside this mansion, they might have hoped to soothe Grandfather's heart. With closed eyes and the expression of one remembering something from the distant past, Genji had broken his long silence. In making that confession, he probably felt like he was betraying his one and only master in the most serious way, even though that person was already dead. Beatrice has revived as a witch, and she is in the mansion even now. Genji had said it, had believed it, had made people believe it, and would take that with him to the grave. This might have been the last service he could offer up to his master. The legend of the witch, the mysterious tale of Rokanjima that was still whispered of amongst the servants. Its true nature was a sad lie. No, it was an act of kindness towards Grandfather, who had lost the person he loved above all else. I remember denying the witch's existence in front of Father on multiple occasions. Now I finally understand how much that must have wounded him. Right now I can understand very well. If I thought I could revive Shannon using black magic, I'd immediately become the next owner of this room and start researching. Aniki. Another strand of tears dripped from George's eyes. Maybe his tears were infectious. Tears rose to Jessica's eyes too, and she sniffled.
Beatrice had said it. Very soon, she will be able to revive people. You'll be able to meet them, she said.
Very soon, the door to the Golden Land will be opened. In the promised land that glitters gold, the souls of all the dead will be resurrected, along with the love that has been lost. Then I will sleep in a world of peacefulness for all time. Did she say that? The Beatrice who gave you the letter?
You don't believe, do you?
If only Grandfather were here, I'm sure he'd be happy. I'm sure he'd be jumping for joy now that Beatrice is about to be revived. In that case, I believe. if grandfather gave up half of his life for this research, trying to resurrect the soul of the woman he loved and spending the rest of his life believing, I'll believe too.
Beller.
When you love a single woman for so long, the people around you catch on to it, and it becomes the truth. Maybe you could say they're just being polite for the sake of your feelings, but right here, now, I'd like to call that magic.
It isn't just being polite. It really is magic. She's a witch. It looks like nobody can see Beatrice after all.
Some time passed. As we listened to the sound of the rain, we considered what kind of love and madness must have possessed the owner of this room as he spent half of his life here. If you ask me as a woman, then while I'd like to be understanding of father's feelings of true love, it did leave mother in an awkward position.
I agree. Cheating is cheating. No way to make it pretty.
Yeah, that's right. Gotta feel sorry for grandmother. So, have there been any rumors about a child between Beatrice and grandfather? The key word Beatrice has been hidden in every corner of this case, so it's natural to suspect some relative of hers. No. I have not heard of anything like that. If there was one, a memento of his most beloved person, he surely would have given them all of his affection. Since he ended up immersing himself in black magic instead, maybe we should assume that there was no such child.
Good night, kid. Have a good sleep, and thank you for being here. Come to think of it, that reminds me of a rumor I heard. You know, right? The story about how grandfather heavily supported an orphanage called the Fukurin House? Enough of that. That is nothing more than slander which would desecrate father. Tell us on, Natsuhi. I think even you'd agree that this is no time to hide things from each other. It's a worthless story. Father made massive donations to an orphanage and had the orphans employed as servants at the head family to give them some on-the-job experience. The story in question is simply some drivel spread by fools who claimed that father was using those orphans for some filthy hobby. For a while, some guys even said he was collecting human sacrifices for his black magic. And he really is doing weird experiments and ceremonies in this room all the time, so I half believe it myself. And these servants who came from the Fukurin house there are several of them, but Shannon and Kanon were the two scheduled during the family conference shift. To resurrect Beatrice, he brought in servants from an orphanage as human sacrifices? After all, everyone grandfather selected as a servant was young, about the same age as Shannon and Kanon-kun. I'm sure it was because grandfather had some bizarre hobby. Jessica, mind your words. When Aunt Natsuhi scolded her, the atmosphere instantly went sour and everyone fell quiet. However, something was tugging at the back of my mind. Sacrifices. Human sacrifices brought over from an orphanage. What is it? Freaky words like sacrifices don't pop up often. And yet I've seen or heard that word recently. Some part of my memory is tugging at me. Hey, Beatrice, what do you know? I had arrived in front of the portraits of Beatrice. It wasn't as massive as the one in the entrance hall, but that portrait, which must have been drawn by some famous painter, was still just as intimidating in this smaller size. Below it, just like in the entrance hall, was the epitaph that supposedly hinted at the location of the hidden gold. Ah. Sacrifices. Here. What the hell, Battler? You're creeping me out. 6 sacrifices. Both of my eyes were as wide as plates. Everything's been predicted right here from the very beginning. Everyone crowded around, and the same expression of shock rose to all of our faces. That's right. It's right there in the epitaph. On the first twilight, offer the 6 chosen by the key as sacrifices. There's no doubt. 6 people died in the beginning. And even on the shutter where the magic circle was drawn, no, where the Hebrew was written, it mentioned the offering of sacrifices.
Ugh. I've been saying that from the beginning.
That's right, Maria said it right at the start. Right after we found the 6 bodies, when Maria was in the parlor watching TV, she said it.
Ooh, the culprit isn't human. It's just the sacrifices chosen by the key.
This has nothing to do with the location of the hidden gold. It's the instructions for a resurrection ceremony using black magic or something. After all, this epitaph requires a large number of deaths. It sure does. Even reading through it quickly, there'd be 6 plus 2 plus 5? 13 people who must die. How many people are normally on this island? It changes depending on the shifts for the servants, but there's Father, my husband, Jessica, and me. And 2 or 3 servants. Today and yesterday there were 5 of them, but there aren't normally that many. Which means that normally, there wouldn't be enough sacrifices to carry out the ceremony. No, wait. There's that rumor that Grandfather was collecting servants from an orphanage to be used as sacrifices in some creepy ceremony. So what does this mean? He increased the number of servants to increase the number of sacrifices and waited for the annual family conference where even more people would gather? Isn't now the only time of year this ceremony could be held? When Jessica screamed this, Maria broke out in that creepy laugh, looking truly pleased.
Haven't you ever heard of people making bets to test their fate?
Like throwing a sandal and saying that if it lands right side up, tomorrow will be sunny. Or saying that tomorrow will be a good day if a coin lands heads up. There are many little superstitions like that. Sometimes when your luck is down and you get bored, and you roll the dice and get 3 6s, you want to believe it's a portent of some miracle. When flipping a sandal, you have at worst a 50% chance. Even if you get it right side up, it's not worth much. But if you carelessly roll 3 dice and they all come up 6, you might think that's a small miracle.
Magic works the same way. You must pray earnestly for an extremely unlikely result. Then, the feelings from all those stored up prayers gain magical power and become incarnate. The magic that Grandfather was trying to perform was probably like that. The key randomly selected sacrifices in a lottery. So, to reduce the chance that he himself was selected, he chose the day with the greatest number of people to carry out the ceremony.
Ridiculous! Are you saying that this entire situation was caused by a mere ceremony for some bizarre magic? Natsuhi yelled. She couldn't quell the fear that a scorpion charm might be the only reason she was still safe. If I hadn't received that charm from Jessica and hung it from my doorknob, would I have been killed mixed in along with those 6? And the strangest part is, even though I hung the charm from the inside of my door, they couldn't get through that door. The culprit noticed the charm from outside the door and gave up trying to open it. A human couldn't have perceived that. A charm meant to stop something that was not human had done exactly that. Impossible. It's impossible. But Natsuhi-san, the epitaph certainly does continue to fit even after that. On the second twilight, those who remain shall tear apart the two who are close. Could this be talking about Eva-sama and Hideyoshi-sama? Painful as it may be, we must reach that conclusion. And after the culprit killed them, they left the words from the third twilight in a letter there. That's right. After carrying out the second twilight, they left the third twilight in that place. The third twilight was just like Natsuki just read. On the third twilight, those who remain shall praise my noble name. If you read it this way, it just keeps going on, doesn't it? On the fourth twilight, gouge the head and kill. Gouge the head and kill. George Aniki's parents were killed with those demon ice picks gouged into their heads. But if they were the second twilight, someone else must have been gouged in the head. That's grandfather. He was burned in the incinerator, and our eyes were so drawn to that part that we didn't notice, but his forehead. Now his head had been gouged. Grandfather was the victim of the fourth twilight? Then Kanokun was... On the fifth twilight, gouged the chest and killed. We thought Kanokun's case was an unexpected encounter with the culprit, but that's wrong. From the very beginning, they planned to lure someone out alone and drive something through their chest. If the culprit has followed the epitaph this far, does that mean 3 people still have to die? On the sixth twilight, gouge the stomach and kill. On the seventh twilight, gouge the knee and kill. On the eighth twilight, gouge the leg and kill. Yes. You could read it that way. Well, I wonder about that. After those 3 die, it reaches the 9th twilight. Take a look. On the 9th twilight, the witch shall revive, and none shall be left alive. We're all gonna be killed by Beatrice. I don't get it. Wouldn't that mean everybody dies no matter how many people there are? What was grandfather after? Doesn't this mean the ceremony would kill him too, no matter what?
It's okay if no one's left alive. On the 10th twilight, we finally arrive at the Golden Land.
On the 10th twilight, at journey's end, you shall attain to the power of the Golden Land's treasures, once and for the last time. The witch shall praise the wise and bestow 4 treasures.
Grandfather wasn't afraid of dying. Look at the second and third of the 4 treasures.
One shall be the resurrection of all the dead souls. One shall be the resurrection of the love that was lost. So, grandfather believed he would eventually be revived, even if he died partway through the ceremony?
Ridiculous, that's insane. When you die, it's over, right? The dead don't come back to life. Isn't that a miracle humanity's been chasing after for thousands of years and that still hasn't been accomplished? So this is what it means? Something like, you'll be able to meet them in the afterlife, where they'll be restored? If what you're saying now is right, would that mean that grandfather, whose remaining life is slim and who's been driven mad by love, is committing suicide? No, a massive forced group suicide? Kenji, is such a thing possible?
I don't know. The master is a man who sometimes has the wisdom to see 1,000 years into the future. However, there are times when that appears to be nothing more than madness to commoners such as myself.
Okay, so we take that for a yes? What do you say, Kumasawa-san?
I don't know anything. That's right, I don't know. Do you think I would be on this island today if I did know? I would have faked an illness or done anything to take the day off, that's right. What about your opinion, Dr. Nanjo? You've been grandfather's friend for many years. I feel the same as Genji-san. Kinzo-san was a man who far surpassed ordinary people. I've even felt a sort of inhuman power from him at times. Even I don't know what Kinzo-san was thinking when he wrote that epitaph. All we can say is that even if Father did write the script, someone else is carrying it out. That's right. At the very least, there's another culprit who attacked Grandfather and Kanoku. Furthermore, that person is still continuing the crimes, just as the epitaph says. The letter in the beginning that we didn't think deeply about. What was it that was written there? We thought back to the recitation of the letter last night. Beatrice had proclaimed something inside it. She had proclaimed that, according to her contract with Kinzo, she would collect everything of the Ushinomiya family as interest. But then she had also revealed a special clause. If someone discovered the location of the gold her grandfather had hidden, that right would be lost. When the letter was read, Grandfather was still alive, but at that time, it had already been sealed with wax by the head's ring. Which meant Grandfather had handed the ring over to Beatrice while he was still alive. If we take a straightforward approach, maybe we should assume Beatrice is carrying out that strange contract, with Grandfather guaranteeing her that right. In other words, this was the same as saying Grandfather knew of and approved of the contents of that letter. In other words, it's basically a joint message from Beatrice and Grandfather, telling us that Beatrice will start collecting interest if we don't solve the riddle. In other words, Grandfather and Beatrice were demanding that we try and solve the riddle of the epitaph, and if we couldn't, they were saying the massacre would be carried out according to the epitaph. What does that mean? What do they want? I don't have a clue what it means.
Look, another letter from Beatrice.
Huh? What did you say? Maria was pointing at the top of the table, where the canned food everyone had been eating just now still lay. A Western envelope from Beatrice certainly was sitting there, but so what? What the... Aunt Natsuhi let out a hysterical cry, looking between her own hand and the table. Because the envelope she had just opened was still grasped in her hand. Basically. So why is there still an envelope on the table? What the hell? What's going on, Maria? Where did that envelope come from?
Just now I looked and it was lying there. Ew.
I don't know anything. This isn't funny. There's only 8 of us here. There's no way some 9th person snuck in. There wasn't enough time during the few seconds that we gathered around the portrait, right? Get back, all of you. Back against the wall. Natsuhi was pointing the rifle at Genji and the others, bellowing at them. Genji-san was overpowered, his face looking like he didn't have a clue what was going on. Of course, I felt the same, but a few moments late, I reached the same conclusion Aunt Natsuhi had. Until just a few seconds ago, there had been no letter like this on the table. And nobody entered this room. That means someone among us placed it there during the few seconds when everyone was looking away, preoccupied with the portrait. Butler-kun, open that envelope and read what's inside. Sure. I picked it up. It was still sealed with wax. Even without disturbing its contents, I realized that this was an as yet unopened envelope, an unknown envelope. Without relying on a paper knife, I tore it open and pulled out the letter inside.
Y'all love her so much. The contents were as follows. Are you enjoying the riddle of Kinzo-sama's epitaph? As you are all probably aware, you have very little time remaining. Please abandon any naive hopes of escaping after the storm passes. This game can only end with my victory, or yours. When time runs out, I will win by default. There will be no ties. Make sure that you do not misunderstand your current situation. That's what it says. It isn't clear who put this letter here. However, I have been able to narrow down the list of suspects. It's you all. Madam, that's too horrible. Just before I moved towards the portrait, I set a can of food down here. At that time, there definitely wasn't anything as strange as this letter there. That's right. There can't be a 19th person. There's no way witches exist. Even when Kanon-kun was killed. Yeah, that could be explained if Kumasawa-san was the one who did it. The truth is that Kumasawa-san entered the boiler room with Kanon-kun and killed him. And then she lied, saying he'd already fallen when she got there. You're making a mistake, milady. Why would I do something like that? I don't have the slightest idea how my parents were killed in that closed room, but when they were killed, everyone except for the servants had an alibi. The only ones who didn't were the servants. But does that really mean it's okay to suspect them? Yes, now that you mention it, they have no alibi for any of the cases. Ugh. Should we really be so quick to make that judgment? But this time, in this room, in this place, in this moment, in this minimally small bit of time and space, it's obvious. Only one of the four of them could have set the letter there in our blind spot. We can't tell who put it there, but it's obvious that one of the four did it. Natsuhi-san, please, calm yourself. A lot has happened today. I understand how much strain is on your mind right now. Dr. Nanjo, it truly pains me to call you suspicious. However, you are Father's personal doctor and his closest friend. You have been by his side for many years, and you might even know about Beatrice. Could you be hiding some kind of old obligation? Of course not. Calm yourself. It was pitiful to watch Dr. Nanjo frantically pleading his innocence. It was probably a normal reaction that anyone would give if they were suspected. Kumasawa was the same. Ever since Jessica voiced her suspicions of Kumasawa murdering Kanon, Kumasawa had been totally flustered. That was why Genji's still calm appearance looked so bold. Natsuhi pointed the barrel of the gun. Genji, you were grandfather's #1 subordinate. Was Beatrice an illusion you showed to father with you as the performer? If, by suspecting me, you recognize me as the master's greatest servant, then I count it as a great honor, regardless of the circumstances. However, I am not the one who put the letter there. Do you expect us to just accept that? You must be the ringleader. Maybe Kumasawa and Dr. Nanjo are your accomplices. And Maria-chan too. Not content to just suspect the adults, Aunt Natsuhi pointed the gun relentlessly at Maria too. But Maria acted as though nothing had happened. Or maybe she thought she would be fine even if she was shot. Maria-chan,
by this point, we can no longer remove someone from suspicion just because they're young. So, for the last time, let me ask the question that everyone's had since last night. Yesterday, who was the Beatrice who handed you that letter?
Ugh.
Maria, don't dodge the question. Make it clear. Who gave you that letter?
How many times do I have to tell you? It's Beatrice, the 1,000-year-old golden witch. If you want to know what she looks like, just turn around. See? She's right there. Beatrice is.
Don't mess with us, Maria. Enough, Jessica. Maria too. Don't you understand the situation? What are you hoping to gain by saying stuff like that? Stop stirring each other up pointlessly.
I don't understand. Who do you all want the culprit to be? You only believe in Beatrice when you don't want to suspect one of your own. When you're trying to settle a grudge because someone who's close to you has been killed. Only then do you want to believe in Hume, who can attack with violence and deny Beatrice. That's why you can't see her. Beatrice exists. You all can't see her.
Silence. I don't want to label you as the culprit, but there is no longer any doubt that you enjoy making this situation unpleasant and are providing assistance to the enemy.
Then what will you do? Shoot me? I don't mind. Very soon the door to the Golden Land will be opened. Then all the dead will be resurrected. Right now, death is nothing to be afraid of.
Mom, she really is suspicious. We can't keep her with us. But, Aunt Natsuhi, please calm down. There's no reason to shoot Maria. Please remain composed. The letter was meant to provoke us, but there's nothing to be afraid of. Even the culprit is scared of what will happen tomorrow. They're scared of the police. Right now, this island is free from the reach of the law, but that's only because it's isolated by this typhoon. Once the typhoon passes, the law will return. So you mustn't shoot.
How can you stay so calm, George Nissan?
One of these four is the culprit. No, maybe all four of them are working together. How can you stay so calm when one of these four might be the culprit who killed your parents? Even I have the desire to find the culprit and kill them. But that would be simple barbarism. I would leave the judgment of crimes to the law. So, no matter how suspicious they are, you mustn't pull that trigger. I feel the same as George Aniki. Aunt Natsuhi, get a hold of yourself for a second. Anyway, it isn't bad to shoot. In times like this, I hear you say you should tilt your head back and say, "Stay cool," 3 times. Let me make this clear. Witches don't exist. Not on Rokkanjima, not in the Ushiromiya mansion. I declare it as Ushiromiya Natsuhi, representative of the Ushiromiya family. There's no witch here. I won't accept Beatrice. No matter what you're planning, I won't let you lay one finger on my daughter or the rest of them. That's my duty as a mother and as representative to the family. Those words were the final words of farewell that settled everything. To protect her daughter, Aunt Natsuhi would regard any suspicious person as an enemy. The only reason George Aniki and I were standing on this side was because, by coincidence, we had a clear alibi regarding the letter. If I hadn't approached the portrait, I would also be at the other end of that gun barrel, treated like a criminal. But even though part of me thought that, part of me was thinking that chasing all the suspicious people from this room would finally guarantee our safety. Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Dr. Nanja, all of them were on grandfather's side. Maybe you could say that once Maria started blindly believing in Beatrice, she was also on grandfather's side. That's right, they're all suspicious. But is this really okay? If we throw out all of the suspicious ones in such a lawless way, will we still have the right to defy the lawlessness of the witch? Natsuhi didn't tell them to leave with her own words, but with wordless pressure, she induced them to say that themselves. Because if not, Dr. Naja didn't say those words, this cold silence would surely continue forever. Calm yourself, Natsuhi-san. Still, I understand your feelings well. I myself feel like there's something wrong with my head after all of these strange, repeated incidents. So I understand well why you would want to suspect us. If you really have nothing to do with this, then my actions now would be beyond rude. However, please understand, just this once. Very well. Let's leave the room. What do you say, Genji-san? Shall we return to the parlor and continue our chess game? If that is what you wish, by all means. I don't want to. After all, that means that we'll have to leave this room knowing that the wolf is among us, right? I don't want to, madam. Please forgive me. It was obvious what Kumasawa-san was trying to say. If she was innocent, then she was being ejected into dangerous territory along with the culprit. In the current situation, urging her to leave this room, along with the suspects, was almost exactly the same as letting her get killed. However, Kumasawa-san really was suspicious just for being the first one to discover that Kanun-kun had been murdered. At that time, everyone except Kumasawa-san had an alibi. Unless we could prove the existence of some contraption or the existence of some 19th person, Kumasawa-san was by far the most likely suspect. I didn't want to believe it. However, Natsuhi and the rest of us were in such a difficult situation that we couldn't help suspecting her as well. So we didn't say anything to stop Aunt Natsuhi from trying to oppressively chase them from the room. We had stopped her from shooting, but we were passively agreeing to chase the others out of the room. On top of that, Maria spoke to the fretful Kumasawa-san. I shall save at this point. They really are hitting her with that Among Us logic. You're the one who did it. No, you. I have an alibi. I was there and there. No wonder I like that game so much. It might have been.
It's okay. Beatrice is kind to those who respect her. You believe that Beatrice exists. So it'll definitely be okay. I'll watch TV in the parlor. Let's watch it together. It's so boring here without TV.
It looked like Kumasawa found Maria's roguish laugh very frightening. However, the three other people had agreed to leave the room. Kumasawa couldn't fight the flow and had to agree, crying as she went. Well then, Natsuhi-san. That will be all for tonight. Let us meet again tomorrow. Yes, please understand, at least for tonight. When the police come, all of us will surely apologize for our rudeness. You might play chess, but do it in a safe place if you can. Genji, I leave them in your hands. Certainly. It can't be helped, can it? They always say that the most frightening bears are those with their children. Genji, Kumasawa, my sincere apologies. Let us meet again tomorrow. Maria-chan too. Please forgive your cold aunt.
Ooh, I forgive you. Ooh.
Madam, the keys to this room. I will hand both over to you. Genji-san pulled 2 golden keys from his pocket and handed them to Aunt Natsuhi. And I will also hand over my bundle of keys to the inside of the mansion. He took out a bundle of about 10 keys of various shapes and handed it over. To the servants, those keys were probably proof of their position. Being placed in charge of those keys meant that they were trusted, relied upon. When they were forced to return them, it meant that they had lost that trust. Thinking about it this way, to Genji-san, who had worked here for a span of many years, there could be no greater shame. However, Genji-san's usual indifferent expression remained on his face. Genji, I had planned that after Father passed away, I would reward you for your many years of hard work and allow you to retire. To treat you like this makes me feel ashamed from the bottom of my heart. I have already received the Master's favor. Everything I have done until today has been repayment for that. Please, do not worry over it. Well then, shall we, everyone? Good night to you all.
Ooh, good night. Good night to you too, Battler. Ooh.
Maria, wait a sec. Knowledge of guilt made me call Maria back. I groped around in my pocket and took out that scorpion keychain. This repels magic, right? Wear it.
Ooh. Didn't you say you dropped it?
Back then, I got ticked off and just bluffed that I'd lost it. There's no way I'd lose the precious charm you gave me. Maria silently took the charm. I was unable to say anything after that. Well then, everyone, good night to you. We watched them leave, our expressions completely worn out, and we weren't even able to respond. Oh. Until the door closed and we heard the auto lock, we were unable to breathe. Then, we were finally allowed to take a breath. After that, I noticed that Beatrice's letter, which I had been gripping the whole time, and which was soaked with my sweat, actually had 2 sheets. The paper had been tightly stuck together, so I'd mistakenly thought that there was only one. There were no characters on the second sheet. The thing drawn there was a magic circle, written with a red ink like blood. Just like how every magic circle up till then had been different, this magic circle was one I'd never laid eyes on before. Inside the circle, a large triangle and a small triangle were fit together in a simple design. But just as before, there was writing in Hebrew, and it seemed clear that it held some kind of meaning. I wanted to know what that could be, but we had just chased Maria, the only person who could understand the meaning of magic circles, out of the room. I thought of this magic circle as Beatrice's second message. What does this magic circle mean? Damn it. After chasing out all the suspicious people, all we had to do was stay barricaded here until morning, and everything would probably be over. Once the typhoon has passed, when the seagulls cry, will everything be resolved? But the letter, which had unexpectedly appeared in the study, forced us to reject that naivety. It had made it very clear that if time ran out, it would mean the witch's victory. When time runs out, is the witch planning to take on the offensive? This time, is she planning to display some fearful magic power? Maybe something that could have been used to kill 6 adults at once? Wait, when is time supposed to run out anyway? I don't know anything. With this, we should finally be safe. Finally. Definitely. Even as she said that, Aunt Natsuhi couldn't stop gripping that rifle. There was no release in the tension of her expression. Of course, none of us felt like breathing a sigh of relief. At least, not until we could hear the cry of the seagulls once more. So that leaves us at a crossroads. I can either quit and continue next time, or if I'm correct, should be able to finish. Should be able to finish this today. I'm just double checking. This is a tough choice because it's either going to be next time I finish like halfway through my normal time, or I go overtime today. And I want to have the time to like prepare some stuff for the second episode, like a new opening screen. I don't know, it's a tough one. I'm just double checking how long this next bit's gonna take, because there are summaries, and I've already played the game, so I already know what happens technically. Technically. Because if this is all I can... Actually, the end roll is really long, so it should be... Alright. Sorry about that. Yeah, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end it here. And... then, after we finish this next time, just gonna... I don't know, do maybe a little chatting thing after. Talk about the plot, and then the week after is when we start episode 2. And yeah, I think that sounds like a good plan to me. And then that'll mean I don't have to rush things now. Gives me time to prepare for episode 2. Gives people time to catch up as well, because episode 2 is a good hopping on point. Yeah, that's the plan. And with that, I'm gonna wrap it up for today. Thank you all very much for watching. I appreciate you being here very much. I love this game a lot, so it's nice to be able to share it with people, and I say that every single episode, and that's because I mean it. If you want to catch up on the previous episodes, I save all the highlights, and I put them in a little playlist on my page, so you can go through them all and theorize along with me, although I know the answers already. But, you know, there's options, and either way, I hope to see you again next time, which is going to be on Wednesday again, same time as always. My schedule's on my About page. I also tweet beforehand, but that's pretty last minute because it's like when I go live. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.